I wish I had the opportunity in a way to talk to the people that feel like they can't afford any legal advice at all and upsell them just a little bit for an hour or two with a lawyer or a coach on a limited scope basis. Because I think that could really help them along through the process a lot more quickly. It might keep them out of court entirely, and it could be a little bit of money well spent. So if we could just, disseminate the message that there are folks out there that will help a little bit, and that little bit of help might actually push things along a lot. Welcome to episode 13 of Access to Justice. I'm your host, Heather Malarick of Merrick Law. My co-host is Evan Clark of Kahane Law. We're also joined today by our very special guest, Kim Mcdonald of Mcdonald Advisory. Kim's a financial advisor and insurance advisor with Raymond James. You can find us on YouTube, on our A2J podcast channel, and online at a2jpodcast.com. Hi, Evan. Hi, Kim. How are you guys doing today?
I'm good, Heather. I'm doing very well. I got the 5G chip implanted into my shoulder last week.
Excellent. So you're navigating satellites now in your dreams, or what's happening there?
Yeah, it's free Wi-Fi for life.
Great.
Worth it.
Super. And how are you, Kim?
Hi, Heather. Hi, Evan. Hi, Ken. Hi, everybody. Yes, we're doing great today. We're excited. I don't really know what we're talking about today. This is a whole new area of the law that I don't know anything about. So I am really excited to just sit back and listen today, I think. So thanks again for having me on your program.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today. He's kind of like the Superman of family law. We've got Ken Proudman here today with us. He is the president of the Albertalegal Coaches and Limited Services Society. During the day, he's a partner at a law firm, family law lawyer, and arbitrator at Bar LLP. And at night, he teaches the advanced family law course at the University of Alberta. He's a regular speaker at the Legal Education Society of Alberta, the Canadian Bar Association, and the Alberta Civil Trier Lawyers Association events. He's incredibly smart, incredibly generous with his time, and he also did the Harvard negotiation class, which I think is just so impressive. So I'm so pleased to welcome you here, Ken. How are you today?
Yeah, not bad. Just blushing heavily. Thank you for the introduction, Heather. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm just saying the things about you that are all true. So, an amazing set of accomplishments. And I didn't even list everything that you get up to. But
we've referred to you already, Ken. Your name has already been dropped multiple times on this podcast. It seems like once an episode, I'm referring to your website, Family Council, and resources that you make available on there and facilitate on there. So we're so excited to have you with us and have a real life family law celebrity, as Heather just described.
See, I just go home and I see myself as like a dog herder. All right, go outside, now come back inside.
Well, Ken, you were kind of like part of the inspiration for this podcast because I think you're just an example of generosity of information being put out there in the world. And you're so giving with information precedence to other lawyers and so committed to putting legal information out there that's accessible to not only other lawyers, but people in the community. So thank you. And thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. You're very welcome. And I think it's the newer generation too. We got started sharing with Napster and torrents, and it's just, I think it's a cultural shift. As it used to be that precedents were heavily guarded, and I think a lot of people are still a little bit cautious about putting things out there, but once you get comfortable with it, it's great to be able to share, and so that we're not all alone at the end of the day.
Yeah. Down with IP. Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think you're right, Ken, that it's a bit of a cultural shift. You know, I remember when Napster was a thing. I remember when that hit. And I mean, but before Napster, we were dubbing CDs onto tapes. And even I had, you know, a high speed dubbing tape deck. So like going from one tape to another tape. Yeah, I've definitely used the precedences from your website that I've adapted for myself, but very helpful, very useful.
I think the plural is precedenti. Is that correct?
Oh, I didn't know it was a Greek word.
So
Is that real?
I feel like we could ask you about so many different topics, Ken, but today we've invited you to share a little bit about limited scope services. And that's our topic for today. And well, you and I are together on this committee, and I think now officially are we aboard?
Yeah, this was the last meeting.
About this. So, but I know that this is a concept that would be new and of interest to a lot of our listeners. So I'm going to ask the first really broad question, which is just basically, what are legal scope services?
So they take very different forms. So there isn't really one specific definition, but I think the approach that our new society is taking is to split it into two different kinds of concepts to help for it to be a little bit more digestible to people. One is we've kept around the older concept of a limited service, or what we've called unbundling in the past. And that's where you can hire a lawyer to help you out with one specific task, or maybe a couple, rather than doing everything on the file. So for example, if you're already negotiating a lot, if someone's already okay with advocating on their own, maybe they just need a lawyer to fill out, put together court documents for them. Vast majority of people outside of law firms don't have experience putting together court documents and can use some help there. And so the idea is to let people know that it's all right to hire a lawyer to do just those things. If there's a couple of things you don't know, if you can't afford a lawyer to do absolutely everything, or maybe what you're fighting about isn't cost effective to do that either, then hiring a lawyer on a limited scope basis could make sense there. And then the other concept that the new society is focusing on quite a bit is something called legal coaching. So traditionally, people have come to a lawyer's office for consultation, and the lawyer and the client try to figure out if they're going to open up a file. Both of them are assessing that. The client is thinking, can they afford to have a lawyer for everything? And some of them think that they can't. Or maybe they have better places to put their resources, or maybe it's a family law dispute where they're just fighting about orthodontics, and they say, all right, well, am I really going to spend thousands of dollars on a lawyer to get reimbursed for $1,000 worth of expenses? So legal coaching is kind of a shift away from that consultation model where people just come to a lawyer once, and then either the lawyer takes on the file or they don't, or the client wants to open up a file and they don't. So instead, the idea behind coaching is that we want people to know that it's okay to keep coming back to lawyers, even if they don't want to hire them on a full-time basis. If they come back when there's a dispute, if they want to do part of the negotiation or the court process on their own, at least lawyers who are identifying themselves as being willing to do legal coaching are happy to have people come back to them for that ongoing advice. It doesn't have to be a one-time consultation. They don't have to pretend like they're going to open up a file just so they can get a lawyer to speak to them. Lawyers are willing to share their knowledge. And some legal disputes, you don't necessarily need a lawyer for. There's especially, like my practice in family law, so I'm probably going to end up referring to that quite often. But in family law, take a parenting dispute, for example, is surely there's a lot of people don't feel comfortable advocating for themselves and getting their positions out there, so they'll hire lawyers for that. But some people are comfortable getting the facts out there. And the test when it comes to most parenting disputes is just what's in the best interest of the child.
Right.
There's certainly a lot of little points when it comes to just procedure going through court, so it's good to get advice there. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of negotiation, once you have enough information about what are common disputes, what kind of arguments turn judges off or might just not be feasible, once you've had those consultations, especially on an ongoing basis, it might be feasible for a lot of people to resolve their disputes there, just with some backup. So I think that's it in a nutshell anyways.
So the goal is kind of, oh, go ahead, Evan.
Oh, okay. No, you know what? I want to hear what you had to say first, and then I do have a question though, so put me in the queue.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the goal then is kind of to try and fill in some gaps in an efficient way where someone might need a little bit of legal advice or guidance, but they can't afford, or maybe don't even require that full representation that most people imagine when they're hiring a lawyer. So maybe they just need an hour or two for some legal advice, or like you said, drafting some documents or things like that. What's an affidavit? And have a lawyer walk them through that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The whole idea is to promote flexibility at the end of the day. Just trying to find out what are the needs of the people requiring legal services, and making it clear that there's lawyers willing to adapt and be a little bit more flexible, that don't necessarily have to follow the traditional model. Because there's a variety of ways to get through legal dispute that don't necessarily need a lawyer at every step. And it's not just for the people who can't afford legal services too, because I know that you see quite often, especially in family court, like there are people who definitely could afford lawyers, but they just feel comfortable doing it themselves, and their financial priorities are different.
Right.
They have better things they can spend the money on, like in family disputes, they can spend the money on their kids. So it's not uncommon to see, for example, even doctors regularly representing themselves in family court. I see that fairly often. Most doctors could definitely afford lawyers, but they have the willingness to figure things out and the comfort advocating on their own. All about flexibility.
Yeah. So in that example, that might be a doctor might feel comfortable enough advocating for themselves. They might feel comfortable with the paperwork side of things, but they might come to someone like you or me to say, like, I just don't know what the law is on this orthodontics piece. So let me spend a few dollars there and get that figured out. And then I'll feel comfortable going ahead and doing all the other parts of it myself.
Yeah, exactly. And especially like because of our federal provincial system, each province has its own set of laws, and sometimes it's quite different from the laws in the other provinces. I mean, sometimes there's overlap, like child support rules tend to be fairly similar, other than a couple ways that they've been varied by appeal courts. But that means that because there's all these different provincial sets of laws, sometimes the law is quite different between provinces, and it's difficult to find information out online. And so one aspect of the new society that we put together is to try to get a little bit more information out there. But alternatively, I mean, until that happens, until we have great resources out there, then people being able to go to lawyers to be able to get that information just quickly, rather than having to spend hours and hours trying to figure everything out and worrying about, all right, well, what online is out of date already? What am I reading? Is it actually applying to a different province? Does it even apply? Am I going to go in there and they're just going to laugh me off and say, no, that's the wrong law, or it changed last week because of the pandemic?
Right. Yeah.
An extra comfort level, so you can prepare a little bit.
Okay.
And the idea behind behind resolving a lot of disputes, just from a negotiation theory standpoint, is that people are a lot more likely to resolve disputes when each side has the same type of information. So if both sides know about the facts that are out there, That's usually the first step in a lot of disputes, is just exchanging information and documents. But then after that, both sides have to have a fairly similar idea of what the legal result might be. And because that's the background of most negotiations. I mean, in a lot of legal disputes, you can agree on, you have quite a bit of freedom to agree on what each side is willing to agree to. But it's nice to know what the alternative is. Is if we don't come to an agreement, what would happen if we go to court? And so if each side has that, then hopefully people are entering into settlements that are more informed, less likely to be bullied if you know that you have a strong position, but maybe the other side is ridiculing it, or maybe you feel nervous about whether your position is right or not. Having that information is just critical. And so going to a legal coach, being able to go back to someone to run ideas by them might be crucial. It could help resolve a dispute right there.
Right.
Even before we really started pressing for legal coaching, I remember there'd be so many people who would come to my office, would give them a consultation, give them a lot of information, and then they'd thank me because that information helped them resolve the dispute. Just that extra confidence, or maybe even just knowing some of the options out there, some of the different outcomes that might happen in a dispute, that might give them a little bit more ideas of what might happen. So make that widespread.
You mentioned, well, I did too, I guess, our society. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the new society is called the Alberta Legal Coaches and Limited Services Society, or for short, ALCOS. It's definitely a mouthful. So luckily our website is a little bit easier to remember, and that's albertalegal.org. So that's what I've been calling it for short. I know some people just call it the Limited Scope Project, or Limited Scope Society. So the idea was to capture what we do, but we still have the short albertalegal.org domain name, so that we're a little bit more memorable in that respect. So our society, we were just incorporated in March of this year. So it took a little while to get to incorporation, because really this has been under works since about 2012, really. Because I believe it was back in 2012 that the National Self-Represented Litigants Project started getting some steam, and there was a 2013 study from Professor Julie McFarlane of that same project that really started to get things going in Canada. And so there was another organization that was based out of Alberta called the Canadian Research Institute for Law and the Family, and it decided to put out a pilot project about limited scope services in Alberta. So it put out a website with basically a list of lawyers who are willing to do limited scope services, and then the person who was running CRILF at the time, John Paul Boyd QC, spent a lot of time going out to seminars, and he worked with Rob Harvey QC to put together that project and that website. And they really put a lot of work into promoting limited scope services in Alberta. And at the same time, they also did a study. They're sending out survey cards and promising gift cards, I think, so they could get some feedback from both lawyers and clients. And the idea was, all right, we're putting this website out there. We're going to let lawyers be on there for free, but we want you to give your feedback. And so they put together a study that let us know how was it working? Was it actually helping people? And it was an overwhelmingly positive response. Fortunately, that's why we're here. That's why we're still around. And on top of that, too, it gave us a few ideas of what was really working, what wasn't working. So we found out that, for example, legal coaching seemed to work fairly well. A lot of people have reported that that's worked well for them. So it's been a heavy focus of the New Society. There was some misconceptions. So, for example, I think especially a lot of third-party service providers were sending people to the lawyers, basically saying that it was a free or discount service, which it isn't. Like, lawyers are still charging oftentimes the regular hourly rate, or maybe a fixed fee in some situations. Actually, probably a lot more situations than you'd normally see. But the idea is that just because of the model, if you're only hiring a lawyer for part of it and doing part of resolving the dispute on your own, then naturally it probably should be less expensive, unless you're sending multiple emails per week to your lawyer, maybe, or to your lawyer for 2 hours a week coaching. That could add up over a year.
Right.
So from there, once that survey was completed, the project was wound up a little bit, as well as the CRILF itself. And so we decided to start up a new society. And there's 7 people on our board of directors now who've put together that new society. And we're hoping to promote limited scope services. We're hoping to promote legal coaching. We want to make sure that there's regular education opportunities out there, so that lawyers can get trained, so they can do it a little bit more effectively and are a little bit more willing to help, knowing that they have the support and knowing that they're doing it right, and just to educate the public in general, to speak to third-party organizations to try to promote limited scope services, so that we have people on the ground who are speaking to people who are having disputes. And the largest component of the new society is our new website, the Albertalegal.org website. So that's where we put a lot of time in to have a state-of-the-art brand new website that's very easy to use, very easy to match people up with a lawyer, and all kinds of additional resources on there.
So between your time as a partner, a teacher, a dog wrangler, you're also very adept at web design. So you've done a fabulous job on the website, and there's a bunch of resources on there. That's where you can find lawyers who are willing to offer these kinds of services. And if there are lawyers out there that are interested in offering these kinds of services, that's where they can sign up as well, right? To join the project.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the Albertalegal.org website is where lawyers can sign up. They can set out what kind of area of law they practice in, what kind of limited services are they willing to provide. And then that way, when people are looking for lawyers who provide those services, it's really easy. The first page just has each of the municipalities. You click on which municipality you're in, then what type of area of the law do you need. Looking for someone who can do business law or family law, whatever the case is. And then there'll be a list of lawyers who match that criteria after that. So, and to be very easy to use. So you don't have to scroll through all 88 lawyers. It's a bit quicker to match people. And we're really trying to encourage lawyers to participate too. So the lawyers who are on the website more often, or most recently, are the ones who end up being higher in the rankings.
Right.
I've got a clarification question here. So from the non-lawyer side, there's some things I'm trying to sort out in my brain right now, and was hoping, and probably all 3 of you might be able to chime in on this. The way I have understood things is when people are looking to separate divorce, lawyers like for people to sort of identify their sticking points, the issues, the problems that need solving. So I know a lot of people who are trying to figure out what route they need to take on first. Do they go to mediation? Do they go to collaborative law? Do they go to a litigator? What's the first step? And my assumption was that each one of these types of lawyers, even arbitrators as well, they want people to have clear issues identified. So then when you're talking about limited scope, I'm thinking, well, aren't all lawyers sort of narrowing down the key issues and working through those? How is this sort of a la carte limited scope situation different than what people would encounter anywhere else. I was hoping you guys could comment on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I guess it depends on what type of legal dispute there is out there. So typically, traditionally, let's say if someone has disputes, they call a lawyer and say, hey, I'm having this dispute. I just need help. I need help. And then the lawyer comes up with a complete plan to get everything resolved. So the idea with limited scope work is that it's usually people who've already acknowledged that they're not able to have a lawyer for everything, or that they've just chosen not to. Or maybe they're speaking to a lawyer and the lawyer says, hey, because of your dispute, maybe this would be amenable to limited scope work. So there's definitely different ways that people can connect. Like let's say, for example, that if people have figured out how they're resolving their dispute, but they go to the bank to get financing, the bank says, no, we're not going to lend you money unless you have a settlement agreement in place. Then it's okay for them to go to a lawyer, just get the agreement drafted, or maybe they've already been down the court process, and someone says, "Hey, do you have a legal coach to give you some idea to talk to you about this?" And then at that point, maybe they speak to a lawyer to get some advice. So there's different ways about how it might come about, but the big difference is just that there's some assumption that the clients are doing some of the work on their own. So whether that's that they feel comfortable doing all of their negotiation on their own, whether they want to be the ones who are in court advocating. So going back to that idea of a parenting dispute, like they probably know the facts better than any lawyer does, even if that lawyer spent a year trying to figure out all of their history. And so if they feel comfortable going to court to advocate, maybe they just need help just with the court forms, for example. So there's a lot of different ways about how it might come about. But at the end of the day, it just means that the lawyer isn't doing every step along the way, and that the client is doing part of it at least. And what that proportion is depends on the scenario, what the client feels comfortable with. There's certainly a lot of people who don't feel comfortable doing any of it on their own, and so they hire a lawyer to do everything. And that's just the traditional model. But I guess the idea is that part of the idea behind the society and the concept and the philosophy that we're promoting is that doesn't necessarily always have to be the default. As even as lawyers, if someone comes to you and says, hey, my ex won't reimburse me for their portion of the kids' braces, then maybe the lawyer should be saying, all right, well, rather than me charge you $10,000 to fight about this,
Right.
one option is that I can give you the information. I can tell you how you can file in court. I can steer you to the resources. I can be your coach. I can be your support, so you feel comfortable doing this, but at least you won't burn through a pile of money, more money than you'll get out of it. So it's just a change in philosophy at the end of the day.
And that kind of comes to my question, which Heather didn't come back to me, so I had to jump in myself. I sell limited scope retainers so hard, and not very many clients take me up on it. And some do, and I have, and those are some of my favorite files where I'm just helping coach somebody through it. And we meet periodically for a brief meeting where they give me an update and I help them figure out what to do next. And I feel great because I feel like I'm really providing a lot of value to this person, and they're taking care of getting everything done on their own. And I think it's a real win-win from my perspective. So what, in your experience, and Heather, please answer as well, is the biggest hesitance that you see in clients from, like, why do they choose, even when it looks like they could probably do it, why do they choose to pay more to get the full representation? What is the biggest thing that keeps people hesitating from getting a legal coach or paying for a limited scope service?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Is I think that most people who contact a lawyer are just intending for the lawyer to take care of everything. They've already made that decision. So we're not gonna be able to convert most of the people that come to us, and that's not why they're calling us the majority, and that's okay. But I think part of the idea, especially behind the society, is to be able to connect people who haven't made that step. Is maybe they've just started to go down the court path themselves. Maybe they're just so intimidated that they just gave up on their legal rights, that they never even bothered in the first place. And so the idea is to connect those people who aren't the ones who call lawyers first, to be able to say, hey, we've got options. Speaking to a lawyer doesn't have to mean thousands and thousands of dollars. Is that there's other options out there. We can support you in different ways, that there's that happy medium. So I don't think we necessarily have to convert all the people who are coming to us. And I think there's a lot of factors of why people want to have a lawyer for every step. I mean, a lot of it would just be anxiety. Like even if an automotive mechanic told me that I could do a big project on my own, well, it would take a huge amount of time. I'd always be worried about it. I'd always be worried about something going sideways. Like, what if I plug in the wrong thing in my car, and then I'm stranded in -40? Like, I think people have the same anxieties about legal services. What if I say the wrong thing to the judge, and then I lose parenting time with my kids, or don't get support, or pay so much support that I'm not going to be able to be afloat, or I mean, one really big factor is that really deserves saying is that the courts are often designed really for big companies at the end of the day. Like, we've got all these big procedures to make everything fair, and discoveries and undertakings, and mandatory dispute resolution services, and hiring experts, and having to go through all these steps to get to an ultimate trial. Because even in family law, when you're divorcing, like, to get property dealt with, usually you have to go through a full trial. So the assumption, we play all these games where we try to build up enough leverage, we try to negotiate so that we can come to a settlement and avoid court, because the vast majority of people just can't afford to go through a full trial with all those procedural steps to go through. It's just incredibly time consuming. But there's some people who are just inevitably going to end up going through a trial at the end of the day. And so having lawyers who can at least help them get through those steps, even though the vast majority of people can't afford to have a lawyer go through all of that, could be very beneficial there as well. And so in some cases, it's just out of necessity that we have to provide these alternative methods, because there's a lot of people in courts who are representing themselves. And right now, they're frustrated. I'm sure it's incredibly intimidating to be in court and not know if you're going to say the wrong thing, and have a judge be really unhappy about it. And because judges get frustrated, and what they see is sometimes improper uses of the court process can tick them off. And of course, we're using very limited government resources, and the courts are already strained and slow. So really, it means that as a profession, if we can change and we can help people out, if we can let them know you don't have to be on your own anymore, is there's alternatives. Like, really, my dream is that eventually judges will even ask people who don't have lawyers, hey, do you have a legal coach? Have you thought about getting one? Maybe that's a possibility. And then people who are just completely lost and intimidated already might be a little bit more likely to get a little bit of backup from the legal community without going bankrupt.
Yeah, I think that's really well explained, Ken. And that was my gut reaction when Evan asked that question. Was, I think it is a big emotional piece. A lot of times when people come that they're intimidated, they're afraid, they're going through this complicated process, they're stressed out. And it's just the path of least resistance sometimes to have someone that's just going to take care of everything for you. But certainly, I think there are a lot of folks that could benefit from a few hours of legal coaching that just don't know that option's out there. So, yeah, well said.
So what's the difference between a divorce coach and a legal coach? Is there a difference? Because we had divorce coaching on our last episode.
Yeah, we got the coaches back to back.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of overlapping in terminology. Because in the collaborative divorce process, there's also an idea of a coach. And there's certain people, like it sounds like it's a little bit more common in Calgary too, to have like non-lawyer coaches to help people get through the divorces. I don't know if there's a lot of people doing that in Edmonton. But it's not really a regulated term. So that's why there's a little bit of overlap between what happens and what people call themselves. So people just for marketing purposes have used that term before, or have used that term to be a little bit more of an intermediary and a separation. There's certain people who have marketed themselves as just being there for support, especially for people who don't have lawyers. So it's just a term that overlaps from that perspective. So same thing with our society. We just had to pick a term, and we thought that term was the best way to explain, because I think it kind of invokes the idea of someone who's a player out on the ice maybe, and then they go back to their coach, and their coach gives them a little bit of direction. So we just thought it was a simple term, but there's not really any regulation, not really any law about who can call themselves a coach, and that's okay.
You'd be getting legal advice though still from a coach, or from a legal coach, or could be getting legal advice from them, where a divorce coach would be sort of helping you more with those communication and emotional aspects of the divorce, but wouldn't be able to give you legal advice as a non-lawyer.
Right. Exactly. So I guess legal coach would be more of coaches who are lawyers. Lawyers
You do get pep talks from both though.
Yeah.
I definitely pep talk my clients that I'm coaching. You can do this. Court's nothing. You got this. Just go in there. You say, hey, I want a JDR. Let's do it. And you get it.
I'm going to start doing that.
Maybe we should be giving foam fingers.
Yeah, I know, like when I was articling even, my principal was convinced that this is the way, a key way that we can bridge the gap of the access to justice problem is through limited scope retainers or legal coaching. And so very early, like right from the beginning of my career, I was encouraged to do it, to offer that as a service, and saw the benefits of it. And so I've always tried to do it. And I have one client that they came to see me and they were very adamant of like, I don't want full representation. I can do most stuff myself. I just need a little bit of help. And like I was joking about giving the pep talk, but really that's a lot of what I provide to this client is they'll get an email from the lawyer on the other side or something, and my client will be freaked right out about it and be like, I need to talk. And then, I'll have a talk and just let them know, oh yeah, this is fine. And you just don't worry too much about it. Continue on with your plan. You have a good plan, and whatever it is. And that doesn't cost my client that much money. It could be like a 15-minute phone call. And to that, and then, okay, they've got that, what you were mentioning before, Ken, of like having that confidence to be able to go up against somebody that might otherwise be bullying them. I'd hate to ever think a lawyer is bullying, but I think it does happen. to have that confidence to stand their ground, to know like, no, okay, I have good solid grounding on my side, and it's okay for me to stand up here and I know what I'm talking about in this particular instance. And I think that this particular client is like super happy to pay me for the legal coaching that I'm providing. And I think this client has spent an exorbitant amount before it was a high conflict case. And so to her, she sees the value. Not everyone can see that, especially right from the beginning. Sometimes, honestly, it seems like the person has to get burned first before they realize, oh, this is not feasible. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Ken? Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I think in general, a lot of people who don't have lawyers and are still going through the court system are people who have really exhausted a lot of the resources already. The people who've already paid for lawyers before,
Right.
and they've seen a lot of what the lawyers have done. So they're starting to get a feel of the court forms and a little bit more about the court process, and they've learned enough to go out on their own. But at that point, I mean, sometimes it's too late. If they've already spent a lot of resources, then it's tougher to go back to a lawyer. And it's really, I mean, a lot of those people are the ones who we want them to know that it's possible to keep coming back to a lawyer, either for specific tasks that they're not comfortable with, or for coaching in general. So, for example, I've always really enjoyed all of the limited scope work that I've done, but there's one in particular that got me really excited about it, and it was one where I was just hired for questioning. And the questioning transcript ended up being very useful, and it was someone who already had a lack of resources, had already gone through lawyers before, and then after that, they hired me again for a different service later on. They're that happy, and we ended up getting everything resolved. So there's certainly a lot of people who feel lost in the system. They don't have the option of hiring lawyers to do everything anymore. And I think you're right too, is that once they can kind of see what's happened, once they have a little bit of confidence to do things on their own, then it's just nice that they know that there's that option out there. A little bit of a hybrid approach. It's not all or nothing anymore. They don't have to go back to that type of scenario where they're paying lawyers to do everything when that might be beyond their budget.
You know, that's another point, though, that I just thought of about this particular client that you mentioned is, like I said, before it was really high conflict, and there's been a steady state for a number of years, and now this client just wants to get a divorce. And my client is not interested in protracted litigation. He's not interested in fighting in court about stuff. Just wants to get the divorce done, and there's some minor issues that need to be resolved for that. So her approach is practical, and I probably more practical now than it was at the very beginning. You know what I mean? So I think that also kind of helped make this person more suitable to that type of a arrangement now than before. Because, going to trial on a limited scope, that sounds daunting to me even. I want somebody else to take care of the trial for me. I don't want to do it.
I was wondering that. Can I hire Ken on a limited scope to do questioning on my files? Is that a thing? No.
And I mean, that's a funny comment too, because especially in family law, I can't speak for others' law, but it's so rare that we ever end up in trial. Like I've got one next month, just coincidentally, but before that, I hadn't been in one for a few years even.
Yeah.
And so it's not like lawyers are in trial every day either.
No.
Depending on the type of law, I guess for criminal defense lawyers, they're probably in trial quite often. But yeah, for many of us though, just means a lot of work. And I mean, if the client is willing to do a lot of that legwork on their own to get everything organized, and if they know the facts very well anyways, then I mean, it's going to be a daunting process either way. And trials are always going to be messy, and picking what what you can actually get into and not being able to go through everything and maybe not being able to hire all the experts you'd ideally wish you could afford. But it's something that lots of people do get through on their own. But they can get through it in a lot more efficient and cooperative and less intimidating process if they have a little bit of support behind them.
So I've been busy doing a compare and contrast in my head while you guys are talking. And okay, hear me out on this, and I want you guys to set me straight. So we have many people who go to mediation to solve onesie-twosie issues. It's supposed to be cheaper. It's a place where many people are attracted to that idea. And I'm starting to wonder if limited scope with coaching is the legal version of the mediation route, because it's a little bit cheaper, but you will get legal advice, but you get that potential, chatting things through with somebody. So like, how do you explain this to people when they're trying to put themselves into a bucket where they can afford their divorce? Can you suggest that limited scope coaching option as sort of the legal option to mediation? Is that even sort of close?
Yeah, it's just all different methods. And part of it is that there's not really a one size fits all approach. Like mediation can be fantastic. Like lots of people get through it without lawyers, especially if it's something relating to, like maybe it's an area where there's not a huge amount of law, such as parenting, or it's more about finding a practical result. And mediation also has the same advantage in that if people are hiring a mediator without lawyers, then each side is just paying towards the mediator. So it could be less costly. And if they're able to resolve it outside of courts, then it means not having to do all those extra steps. But mediation is just one process. Like the impediment to mediation sometimes is that both sides have to agree to it. You can't force the other side into mediation. And there's a lot of people out there who just aren't in the right mind frame, I guess, to come to a negotiated agreement. Is that there's some mediations where, let's say if someone's just being unreasonable or they just refuse to do something, then a mediator can put a lot of pressure on them, can let them know what might happen in court, can give them the sense that maybe it's inevitable, that what they're opposing might happen anyways. But if they continue to oppose, then sometimes you need something like court. And so for those people who really have to go down that traditional method, if they aren't able to get into something like mediation, arbitration, or collaborative law, then I think that's where limited scope services is more geared towards. And even mediation, like don't get me wrong, people can hire lawyers for that too. That could be a form of limited scope work. Maybe someone is representing themselves in court, but they say, all right, well, both sides are willing to agree to mediation, so let's give it a shot, but I don't feel comfortable advocating on my own. I get really intimidated when the other side is there, don't know the law, whatever the case is, so they can hire a lawyer even just for that. So it's about finding a process that fits. Ideally, very, very long term, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if family law ended up going to some kind of model where people just keep going back to the same type of arbitrator, someone who can tell them, all right, these are the documents I need, this the homework I need to do. Come back next meeting, I'll make a decision, or I'll say what other homework we need to do, rather than going through a different judge each time. So, I mean, something like arbitration can be great, but arbitration, mediation, those also cost money at the same time too.
Yeah.
Arbitration, especially a little bit more so than mediation, but again, with arbitration, each side also has to agree to it. Same thing with collaborative family law. Each side has to agree to the process. So they're great processes if you can get people to agree to them. If there's at least some desire to cooperate. I mean, we're not talking about people who necessarily cooperate about everything, because otherwise they wouldn't need one of these processes.
That's right.
Everything. But there has to be at least a minimum amount, a small amount to cooperate, even if maybe they just have different ideas of what should happen, but they still want to get things resolved. Then mediation is great for that. But especially if you have one side who's just dragging their feet, maybe there's some mental health issues involved, they tend to be a little bit more likely to go through the court process. And so that's what a lot of limited scope work tends to be geared towards, is those people who find themselves forced into the court process. But there's a lot of forms. So limited scope work could be involved in other areas. It just tends to be a little bit more, tends to be used a little bit more often on disputes that go towards court.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on it, but Heather, I think you also do. I would like to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, I mean, collaborative law, the process requires each person to be represented by a lawyer. So I think that limited scope services and coaches would probably not dovetail with that process particularly well. But, I think that legal coaches could really serve in any of the other dispute resolution processes quite well. So Ken was saying, maybe sometimes people get a little hung up in mediation on something, someone's being a little unreasonable. So you might check in with a coach then and say, listen, this is what's going on. Are they being unreasonable or am I? What's going on? And get some advice and some information that might help that logjam that the mediator they're not able to give legal advice in the mediation. So, that could help in that respect. I'm just kind of like thinking through the different scenarios. So I think Ken's right that we often see these happening in the litigation process, but I think that legal coaches could be really useful in most of the other dispute resolution processes too.
Yeah, I think of it kind of this way, Kim. At the very outset, like when I first meet with a client, I look at the end of the meeting, I talk about options for resolving things, and generally it kind of goes like this. The best and cheapest way to do it is direct negotiation. Two people sitting in the room together and hammering it out. That's the cheapest, and often, if possible, produces the best results that everyone's happy with. And so in a way, like I have plenty of clients where after that first consultation, they just needed that information so then they could know what they're talking about in order to be able to negotiate one-on-one. In fact, one of the, I think I've mentioned before, I have these different tiers of initial consultations, and the higher tiers, I give them a written summary of the advice that I give them in that meeting. And that's a nice tool that they can use. They can take in their hand. They can show it to the other person if they want, as long as it's nothing that's going to, prejudice their position. And usually it's not. Usually it's general advice about their situation, not necessarily like something that would be a problem to share. And so they can take that into negotiations and show them, look, this is what a lawyer said is the reasonable this is what the law says about child support, or what about or about spousal support, and that can be a tool to help them. And so that's in a way that's like a limited scope, even though I don't necessarily talk about it that way. But that is a situation where they've got advice from me and they've taken that, and then they can go and do something themselves. And then kind of like the next step up would be represented negotiation. And then if that's not working out, and mediation would be in there as well, somewhere in between those or something, then you need a third-party decision maker if none of those work. And so arbitration or court. And yeah, I think Ken summed it up well, where they could be involved anywhere along that process. Now, Ken, you are an arbitrator, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you are a mediator as well.
Experienced one, but
sorry, what's that?
Not a particularly experienced one. I'm just starting to get into arbitration.
But you are an experienced family lawyer, and we've talked before about how important it is that if you're going to choose a mediator, it should be a family lawyer that's experienced that can help make sure that the result is good. And I would say arbitrator the same. And so do you, Ken, as an arbitrator, because arbitrators, not everyone will allow what we call self-represented litigants, well, they're not litigants in this case, but self-represented people to come to an arbitration. Do you have self-represented people in in your arbitrations, or do you allow that?
I haven't yet, just because my referrals tend to be from other lawyers. And most of my practice is separations involving businesses. So I think at that level, people tend to be just more likely to have lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
But in theory, though, I wouldn't have any kind of problem with someone who's self-represented being part of an arbitration. And I think it'd be a great idea if they had a legal coach. Because in arbitration, you're hiring a private individual, and sometimes we'll do fixed fee quotes. But even then, like when I do a fixed fee, I usually say, unless there's some kind of change in the scope, so unless maybe new issues come up and then all of a sudden we need extra days of hearings. And so if people are still paying for the arbitrator, then if they have a legal coach, then that can minimize the chances that they might have to go through some of those extra steps and still reduce their cost in the arbitration. Because that's the only big concern, is that with someone who doesn't know the process quite as well, they might it might mean a higher cost on the arbitration end. Yeah. So,
Right.
But otherwise, yeah, I think that arbitration is very, very well suited to people who don't have lawyers. So the whole idea behind arbitration is that we don't have court rules anymore. Like we still have the law about how issues should be resolved, but we don't have all the really technical processes. So really, in a lot of ways, it's meant to be a process that can help people who don't have lawyers. It can be a process that's less intimidating because there's far fewer rules, and you're going to get a decision at the end of the day. You don't have to jump through all these hoops because the hearing gets scheduled ahead of time. You don't get to a point where you just don't know what to do next, and so you don't move forward. In arbitration, hearing scheduled, the arbitrator can help identify if there's any preliminary issues to be dealt with. Like, do we need to get financial information exchanged first? And even though I haven't necessarily arbitrated where there is someone who's a self-represented litigant, I've been the lawyer, one of the lawyers for one of the parties on files where there are self-represented litigants, and it seems like it does help them because they can focus on pointing out, like, what are they seeking and what are the facts, without having to focus so much time on just trying to figure out the procedure. So I think it's a phenomenal process for people who don't have lawyers at every step. But something like coaching can be very helpful in just making sure that everything's done efficiently, that there aren't issues that that maybe they're skipping past. Like they might be leaving money on the table if they don't know about their full legal rights.
The only kind of concern I would have, and maybe I don't understand arbitration. Maybe I misunderstand something about arbitration, but we had Catherine Spafford on here in one of our early episodes, and she talked to us about arbitration. And one of the things she told us is that the arbitrator can only make a decision based on what's presented to the arbitrator. And so the only concern I would have is if a self-represented individual is going to be able to present the law that supports their position and present enough to enable the arbitrator to make a decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to be able to point out what you're asking for. Like if someone is in an arbitration and they don't ask for something, the arbitrator probably won't address that. And it could even be an error for the arbitrator to address it if someone doesn't bring it up. Because the arbitrator has to be neutral. Like they can't try to think of what might be an argument for one side, even if they don't have a lawyer. So they've got to be fair in their process. They can't steer anyone around. As they can help out with the process a little bit, but they're not meant to be there to advocate for someone or to make sure that everyone's claiming all of their legal rights. They're there to make a decision. They're there to be neutral. They're hopefully not helping out either party's arguments. But you definitely want to know what you're going to what you're asking for before you go into it. Yeah, because otherwise you might be leaving something on the table.
Mhm. I have one pretty practical question, I think, which is if I'm looking at hiring a legal coach or someone to help me out with a limited scope services sort of situation, how do I know what I'm responsible for and what the lawyer is responsible for? Like if I get a letter from the other lawyer or get served with something, how do I know who is doing what with that thing?
Yeah, that's an excellent idea because it brings up a pretty big point about limited scope services in that there's always a service agreement signed at the beginning, or at least there should be. If court is handling it properly. And the idea is that the Law Society has put out rules that basically say that if someone's entering into a limited scope arrangement, it has to be really, really clear to the client about what's expected. And so the idea is that it's put out in writing to say, this is exactly what you're hiring the lawyer for. And so it might be defined to one task. It might just say meetings with the lawyer. The agreement might go into a little bit more detail just to specify, all right, if the client gets served with legal documents, if they get letters from the opposing lawyer or whatever happens, that they're responsible for that. So it depends on how it's drafted, but either way, the Law Society's rules are clear, that it has to be clear. The expectations have to be clear. So we don't want people misled into thinking that they have a lawyer when maybe they've only hired a lawyer for very specific things. And then maybe they get served with a court document and no one attends to it. It's got to be clear.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes the service agreement will say that each side can agree to add additional tasks. And ideally, it should be in writing if there's that kind of agreement. And until then, it's usually expected that the client would be responsible for those steps. But all comes down to the agreement, and it's just important that that's well spelled out, and that people have those conversations with their lawyers. So if the agreement doesn't make sense, if it's more than just one very specific, distinct task, they might want to ask, all right, well, what if I get served with a court application?
Mhm.
Am I going to court? It's worth specifying those kinds of things and just asking those questions, the what ifs. But hopefully you don't even have to go into all the what ifs. Is that usually the agreement should be clear enough to say what is and what isn't covered at the end of the day. And it's because it's ultimately the lawyer's responsibility to point those things out, to have that specified in the agreement, to have those discussions.
How about people's obligations then to talk to or to let other people know that they've hired a coach or someone on a limited scope basis? So if I'm negotiating with my ex on parenting, do I need to let my ex know that I'm being coached by Evan, or do I need to let the other lawyer know? Do I need to let the court know?
So generally, you don't need to let people know that you're speaking to a coach. It can be completely confidential.
Mhm.
That way, when you show up in court and you already know the law, you can just pretend that you did a lot of research and you're brilliant. That's certainly.
Perfect.
And some lawyers will also specify, like, because if lawyers are contacted by their lawyers or contacted by the courts or contacted by the other party, like sometimes we have an obligation to respond.
Mhm.
And so we might even specify in the service agreement to say, like, look, if you're filing any court documents, you can't list our contact information, because there's danger there too, is that if the lawyers think that they're not representing the person, maybe they're not forwarding things over right away, maybe there's lag in communication, maybe the other side is misled into thinking what's going to happen and who they're supposed to serve, because people need to know who they should be dealing with.
Right.
Yeah, so usually that's something that's discussed, both in service agreements and by usually by lawyers performing limited scope services.
Okay.
But it depends on what everyone agrees to at the end of the day.
Okay. So those are going to be chats you're having with the lawyer at the time you're hiring them before you really get into things.
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, for my approach, Heather, as you know, I usually use a scope of work that details exactly what I'm doing. And so I try to make it very clear for my clients, if I am operating on a limited scope, what exactly that means. And usually, instead of just having it's only what's in the scope of work, it'll also say, and I'm definitely not doing these things unless we specifically agree, including things like what Ken just mentioned, which is getting on the court file as a lawyer on record. Like if you're on limited scope, you definitely don't want to do that unless that's part of what the client wants you to do, because that changes everything. And like it or not, judges treat self-represented litigants different than lawyers. And most of the time, they're more lenient to self-represented litigants. They're not really supposed to be, but you know, the judges are interested in seeing justice done, and normally not standing on procedure for the sake of the procedure. And so, you know, if your argument isn't quite perfect, and you're not quite polished, there's just more forgiveness there inherently in the system, right or wrong. So I don't want to say it's like you're necessarily going to get an advantage being coached versus hiring a lawyer, because I don't know that that's necessarily true, but yeah, there's consequences for going going to court by yourself with a legal coach behind you, as opposed to having a lawyer on the record representing you in the court.
Yeah, and the idea there is that judges are typically bound to at least be a little bit more procedurally lenient, or at least be a little bit more aware of the struggles that people without lawyers might be facing. So it doesn't mean that they're getting any kind of advantages about the ultimate outcome.
Right.
But if they're not doing things completely properly along the way, in some ways, sometimes they will receive a little bit of lenience that maybe a lawyer might not. Even then, I had one lawyer tell me a while ago that it was important to be able to put your pride aside as a lawyer too, and ask the court for a little bit of leniency sometimes too. If there's issues, sometimes you can ask the court for a little bit of procedural leniency, and I think a lot of lawyers just often don't ask that because it can make them look weak or maybe not as confident or whatever they're worried about.
Right.
The day. I tend to find that if you can tell courts why you need a little bit of leniency when it comes to procedure, sometimes they'll help you out a little bit more. But when it comes to law, courts can't relax the law when it comes to people who don't have lawyers. How the dispute is decided at the end of the day doesn't change there, and so that's where if people are at least speaking to a legal coach and getting that information, then hopefully they're maximizing what they're entitled to under the law by making the right arguments that they need to make.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ken. To be clear, we don't think you should rush to court being ignorant of procedure, thinking that you're going to win the day because you're self-represented litigant and you're not expected to know it. That's a very, very risky choice to make.
Definitely.
But if you are somebody that feels comfortable going to court, but don't feel like spending a whole lot of money on a lawyer, spend a little bit of money on a lawyer for a legal coach, and it can be money very well spent.
Absolutely.
So Kim, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I have a MythBuster question now. So as we know, many people think that lawyers are money hungry and just trying to get a lot of money from the divorce. Was curious, somebody listening to this might think, oh geez, like I need to warn my friend who's in divorce. Maybe they're a limited scope and not a full scope. They need to be aware of this before going to the lawyer so they're not sold on a full scope when they might only need limited scope. So my question to all three of you is
like the upsell,
is there an upsell for the
extended warranty on the VCR? Do people still sell VCRs?
Only in antique shops.
Do you guys upsell divorce like as a full scope, or do lawyers, not you guys are awesome. Is there a risk for people not being educated before going in?
I think it's almost a question of a downsell, is that we already have people coming to us who want the full divorce, want full representation. And so we're talking more about a cultural shift to be able to go out of our way to tell people that maybe in some circumstances that's not quite necessarily. Especially if we meet with a client and we find that maybe their financial picture doesn't accommodate, or maybe what they're seeking might not be cost effective to pursue, then it's another option in the lawyer's toolbox. So it's more of an ethical obligation to point that out at the end of the day. When people are already coming to us for more, being able to tell them, maybe you don't need the full meal deal. So I'll call it a downsell. And really, I mean, I don't know if anyone's in family law for the money either. Typically, like going back
All right,
to
Heather.
customs philosophy, really, there's a huge risk in that if a separation is drawn out too long, people run out of money, they become collection risks. Like really, we tend to make more money by getting things resolved quickly before people run out of money, because otherwise we're just not getting paid.
Look,
I mean,
the number of people that can afford a real knockdown, drag out divorce there's just not that many of them. I mean, even the Gates, they did a separation agreement before they announced the divorce, right? Like they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think upsell. Ken brings up such good points. So he deals a lot with people who have businesses, and they become quite complicated for that reason. And because a business is successful, so there's money there. And in corporate law, where there's litigation between businesses, there's money there, and businesses can see the litigation as a cost of doing business. Family law is just not like that. There's a finite amount of money. Most people are employees who have a salary that is X, and most people are not operating on 60% of their salary, and they've just got 40% they can burn on legal fees. You know, there's a finite amount of money. And if it starts to get complicated and difficult, then that money runs out. And then whether or not they want to be by choice, they're now without a lawyer. So that's something that I see all the time. I'll have a client come in who doesn't necessarily have a lot of money, and I really try to tell them or make available to them as an option, if they want to keep their legal fees down, that I'll help them as little or as much as they want. And I think, I don't know about Ken and Heather, but the thing that I enjoy the most about practicing family law is helping people. So the relationships with my clients and teaching them, helping them, things that and even negotiating with other lawyers, if it's, a lawyer who also likes negotiating and we've got reasonable clients. Those are the kinds of things that I enjoy. Things I wouldn't mind doing without. Going to docket court, or, even going to court at all. I wouldn't be upset if I never went to court ever again. And so I'm happy to provide the services of the things that I enjoy doing, like teaching my client, helping my client problem solve to figure out how the law works in their case, and avoid the stuff that is annoying. So it is kind of an upsell that is a downsell, because it's really a win for me and it's cheaper for the client. Heather, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with both of you more. I love the idea, the concept that it's actually more of a downsell in some circumstances. And like, I wish I had the opportunity in a way to talk to the people that feel like they can't afford any legal advice at all and upsell them just a little bit for an hour or two with a lawyer or a coach on a limited scope basis. Because I think that could really help them along through the process a lot more quickly. It might keep them out of court entirely, and it could be a little bit of money well spent. So if we could just, disseminate the message that there are folks out there that will help a little bit, and that little bit of help might actually push things along a lot. That's where I would like to upsell things. Yeah.
This is a very important message. I think that a lot of people, especially in my industry in the financial services, I think this is a message that people need to be delivering to people, because Heather, to your point, many people don't seek out legal advice because they worry about what the cost is, and they just don't go down that road. They don't even explore it. Mm-hmm. And what all three of you are saying is, hold on, there's help for you, and we need you to reach out to us so we can tell you what that's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not suitable for everybody, but it sounds like all three of us are willing to try it out for anybody that's willing to try it out. Because, I've seen success with that type of a model, and I'm sure we all have.
Yeah.
Now, Ken, is there anything that we haven't talked about legal coaching or anything that you've just been dying to share with us?
The only big thing I can think about is I was hoping I could speak about our new website a little bit, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Of course.
The Albertalegal.org website. And I'm particularly excited about it because I wrote the code for it. And that's why I got roped into this president position, just because I kept moving everything along enough that people just assumed that I was leading it, I guess.
Yep, that's correct.
Well, I think you'll be happy to know, Ken, this is not the first time that Albertalegal has been mentioned on this podcast.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, then.
Yeah. I brought it up like in an unrelated matter. It was like the wrong reference, but I had it in my mind. I'm like, there's something Ken's got going on. And then Heather was like, no, that's the wrong thing. And I'm also a member of the board. So tell it, like, we've talked a little bit about it, but like Albertalegal, how can people use that as a resource? Like if somebody's like, okay, I think I want some legal coaching or a limited scope retainer, how can Albertalegal help them make that a reality?
So the most obvious part of it is just the directory on the front page where people can be linked up with limited scope lawyers willing to do legal coaching. So that part's obvious enough. As soon as you go to the front page, I think it's easy enough to figure out. But there's a lot of parts of the website that aren't quite so obvious. Parts of them that we're still working on, but that we have pretty high hopes that they'll be able to help a lot of people going forward in the future. So there's a few different tabs I'll talk about. So one is that there's a resources tab. And so the resources tab has just some basic information about limited scope services, information about representing yourself, information about courts in general, information about, there's the website.
Kim, just so you know, I don't know if, so Kim just pulled up the website and is doing a screen share. We're using Zoom, but I don't know if it'll show up on the YouTube video.
It might not.
I think it doesn't, because I did this before during one of our meetings, and I think I already edited that one and there was no webpage. So we basically, even for the podcast, obviously people can't see it, but also for YouTube, people won't see it. But Kim pulled up albertalegal.org and we're all just basking in its beauty.
Oh, isn't it beautiful? All right, so I'll just be very descriptive then. So there's the resources tab that has information about courts and representing yourself, information about limited services in general. That same tab also has a list of the resources throughout Alberta, the organizations throughout Alberta that provide low-cost legal representation. So we're delving into a different concept because that is really limited scope work. But for the people who qualify, for example, for legal aid, Edmonton Community Legal Clinic, Calgary Legal Guidance, Student Legal Services, Student Legal Assistance. There's lots of regional clinics throughout the province. So there's links for all of those for the people who can qualify. So again, those aren't really limited scope services. That's just lower cost legal services, which isn't the same as limited scope, but we've got the links there anyways. So you can see if you can qualify for them. There's information about some of the different ways of resolving things outside of court. Some of them that we've talked about today. So there's links to the Alberta Family Mediation Society, Collaborative Divorce Association, Alternative Dispute Resolution Institute. So they've got different information about things like mediation, collaborative law, and arbitration that we've spoken about. We put up some resources for lawyers as well, because part of our mission is to educate lawyers to provide them things like model retainer agreements to make it easier for them to do limited scope work. So we're trying to educate lawyers as well. So that's the resources tab. There's also a links tab. And so the links tab is where for different areas of the law, we've put up useful links. Right now, there's only family law because we're just in the process of launching everything right now. And we're trying to convince other lawyers to put up links to other areas of the law. So for family law, for example, there's all kinds of links to some of the different legislation that's out there, information about family court, some just general articles about separation, linked to some calculators. So the idea is that, let's say if someone hires a legal coach or hires a lawyer for limited scope services, well, that lawyer can say, hey, if you go to the links page, here's some resources for you. So hopefully the lawyer can also help the person navigate through some of this. But if someone's already representing themselves, well, here's some extra information from them, rather than thousands of people individually consulting lawyers to get this information. Just go to the website, and you can.
I'm bookmarking this page right now because I've got all these links like bookmarks. And I've got all but hey, here's one website where I've got all these links in one place.
Yeah.
So that looks great, Ken. And we're just partway through this, and already I'm loving the website.
Thanks. And it's all lawyer-generated content. So the idea is that for lawyers who sign in, they can modify all these and they can add new resources and update things. So we don't have a budget, so there isn't someone sitting there every day to see what's changed. But we're hoping that lawyers will help to keep this up to date and review it. And eventually, I'm going to build it in, so there's some kind of reminder that goes out that maybe tells lawyers, "Hey, no one's updated this page for a while. Does someone want to have a look at it?" So a little bit of a work in progress. Similarly, there's a tab that's labeled "Ask a Lawyer," and this one isn't. This one doesn't operate right now, just because I wanted to make sure that the lawyers are trained and know about the website a little bit more before we start having people use it. But fairly soon, the idea is that it's going to be kind of like a chat board. Is if people have just really general questions about the law, so they can put up their question, and then emails will go out to lawyers, and hopefully lawyers will respond to questions. Just really generic things. Like a lawyer can't really give legal advice over low blurb in text. Usually we have to chat with someone for at least half an hour to figure out everything that's going on before we can give a real opinion. But if someone just has a really, really basic question about the law, they can post it here, and then hopefully other people will find it. Because we're also hoping that just by having content, that will help people find us. Because like I said, a lot of people are already going around without a lawyer, not knowing that it's possible to even have a legal coach. And if they're already Googling trying to find out this information, hopefully they'll find our society and know that it's an option. So they can make that decision whether they want to go there or not. So that'll be a little bit more like a chat board, the Ask a Lawyer feature. The last big part of the website is the library. And again, a work in progress. But the idea is that it's basically like a Wikipedia kind of page, is that lawyers can add content, just putting out some basic information about the law in general. And then that way, if someone wants to learn about Alberta laws, they can read little summaries prepared by lawyers. So we're still working on this. It's definitely very much under construction because the society and the website are new. But we're hoping that we're able to provide just a lot of information for people so they don't even necessarily have to consult a lawyer, as they can figure out some of the basics on their own if they want to, or they can pay for a lawyer to explain the same things to them. But the idea is just to put the resources out there so that people who want to have more knowledge, want to figure out more on their own can. So that's the website in a nutshell. I'm definitely excited about it. So thanks for letting me speak about it.
Yeah, it's so great, Ken, because it's just a nice one-stop shop sort of for any Albertan that wants this information can come here, find it in the nice headings that you've laid out, but also have some confidence that it's reliable information as well, because it's been posted by a practicing Alberta lawyer that works in family law. So that's really great. It's really fantastic.
And not only that, Heather, it's not posted by a law firm.
Right.
You know, because a lot of law firms post a lot of good information, but there's
it's a teaser.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of, and sometimes it can come across as kind of like, well, I don't know how to explain it, but the fact that this is from, you know, a consortium of lawyers from disparate practices, because that's, I mean, yes, you wrote the code for it, but Heather doesn't work at Bard, right? She's on the board, and there's other people involved as well that don't work at your firm, and so it's awesome, and it's really the essence of what we're trying to do here as well, is have resources of information, make those available to people, so that people can just learn more about the law. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing that I think we see with our clients when they come to that initial consultation, is they just don't know. They don't know the law. They don't know how it works, because, you know, it's their first time dealing with something like that. They're not an expert on it yet.
Exactly.
And that's just it. And I mean, really the only time that we see, especially something like divorce culturally, we barely see any of it in movies and TV. Most people don't know a lot of the basic rules until you run into it. And it's tough.
Except Liar Liar, which is a very accurate depiction of how divorces work.
Yeah, so the whole idea is to empower people to be able to help themselves if they want to, and to whatever extent they feel comfortable.
Excellent.
So that's the idea, is they can choose what extent they want. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a great message, Ken, and to send to folks out there too, that they have options and they have some control and some decisions they can make about how much they want to involve a lawyer and how much information they can get on their own. So,
well, there's also the other, you know how you're getting advice from family and friends and it's not good advice. Well, it's not just people who are separating and divorcing that need to go to this website. It's people who are giving advice about divorce to their friends. They might want to consult Ken's website, albertalegal.org, first before they start talking, because they might give their friends a better leg up if they do some research first.
Right. Or maybe this is a good resource for, sorry, Ken, what did you say?
Friend, a financial planner.
Or maybe if your mom is getting too opinionated about your divorce, you could give her this website to go to and say,
go to Alberta Legal. Leave
yeah,
it alone.
just go to albertalegal.org and then we can talk about this.
I just worry that people think that like Albertalegal means like legal cannabis or something like that.
Yeah, I think once they land on the website, it becomes pretty clear that weed is not involved.
Yeah, it's May 20th, not April 20th. We're okay.
Yeah, well, Ken, thanks so much for coming. To our listeners, I mean, you can reach out to Ken for all kinds of things. He can be your mediator. He can be your arbitrator. He can be your lawyer. And Ken does a lot of work with, as we've mentioned a couple times, people that own businesses and have complex finances that way, and also farms fit in there as well, because a farm is a business. And I know he has a lot of experience working with those types of files. So if that's your situation, Ken might be a good fit for you. It's a little shameless plug for you, Ken. We appreciate you coming on.
And he's just so darn lovely. Thank you so much for your time, Ken. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and we're so glad that you came on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a blast, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Good. We'll take you on that offer for sure.
Oh, absolutely, we will.
Let's talk tax next time.
Yeah.
Hey, now we're talking.
Yeah. You just got Kim fired up. Fantastic. Well, this has been another episode of Access to Justice. Thanks for listening or watching. If you have any questions you'd like us to address on future episodes, send an email to access2, that's the number 2, justicepodcast@gmail.com, access2justicepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. Thanks for listening.
Any information in this video is general information only and is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. Watching this video does not create a lawyer-client relationship. You should always seek the advice of a lawyer or other qualified professional for advice regarding your individual situation. While we take care to ensure that the information contained in this video is accurate and up to date, we make no warranties or representations as to the suitability, completeness, or accuracy of the information contained in this video. Any reliance you place on the information is at your own risk. Kahane Law Office, Merrick Law, Heather Malarick Professional Corporation, Evan Clark Professional Corporation, Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, and any guests will not be responsible nor liable in any way for any content, including but not limited to any errors or omissions in the content, or for any loss or damage of any kind incurred as a result of any content communicated in this video, whether by Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, or by a third party. Kim Mcdonald is a financial advisor with Raymond James Limited. Information provided is not a solicitation, and although obtained from sources considered reliable, is not guaranteed. The view and opinions contained in this media are those of Kim Mcdonald, not Raymond James Limited. Securities-related products and services are offered through Raymond James Limited, member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James advisors are not tax advisors, and we recommend that clients seek independent advice from a professional advisor on tax-related matters.
Graceful fingers intertwine, comfort gladdens